Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At Home with Holmes, our local family podcast, where we cover everything from geopolitics to local Albertan politics. And speaking of family and Albertan,
we are very pleased to share with you a personal sponsor, Cabin on the Coulee Farm. Cabin on the Coulee Farm is a hidden gem in central Alberta here, and it is open from anywhere to May and November. That's a very big window, and our family has made it a priority to go there annually now because, as you know, we don't believe in just doing academic research all day or being politically involved on a quotidian basis. We need time for respite and repose and to touch some grass, and there's no better place to touch grass than here. It is actually rated #1 farm stay in Canada on TripAdvisor. Sounds like some good advice. You should go and take it. Because here you can get the full seclusion experience, from open range hikes, your fires, or if you're anything like my clan, maybe chopping some wood, embracing your inner redneck. And it is a very personal sponsor because it doesn't get more homey than Eric and Josie, who are the family owners of this Alberta prairie glamping business.
And if you want to check out more about their story, you can go on their website, cotc.ca, and that will show you the 3 locations that you could potentially stay at. One being the cabin, which is for a bigger crowd of people. It can hold 6 guests, has 3 bedrooms and 4 beds. And then there is the Coulee Yurt, which has 5 guests, 3 bedrooms, and 3 beds. This one's for a middle size, again, to bigger crowd. And then we have the Grouse House, which can hold 4 guests, 1 bedroom, and 2 beds. All of these are pet friendly, excluding the Coulee Yurt. So if you or anyone you know is looking for a beautiful sunrise in the morning, listening to the sound of cows, or are like me and want to experience your first awe-inspiring moment with God under the starry night sky that actually happened, then go again to their website, cotc.ca, or check out their Substack for some prairie life updates and some behind the scenes information, photos, videos, and updates on what's going on with their operations, because this is how you support and explore the beauty of what we're proud to call our home, Alberta. So thank you guys so much for watching our sponsorship. And without further ado, let's get on with the video. Hello, everybody. What episode is this? Oh, this is the Fireside chat. This is the Fireside chat. It's not really much of a part, but
yes.
The conclusion of our series.
Yeah.
Because we're in a circumstance where people had questions and comments. So we're going to do our best to help rectify that. If we can remedy it, we will. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of reference to, as we did for all the episodes, the APP's website, where you can find this document's PDF, because a lot of the questions, even that we did get, are actually answered, even within the document, but they might not have watched every episode. So we're going to try to do a little summary here.
If you haven't yet watched the series, I would recommend it because there were questions that came in from the viewers that I, with the help of some of the connections that we have in Calgary, reached out to the co-author of the document. His name is Dennis. And he so kindly got back to me quickly. And one of the things that I think is most admirable about his response were, because these were specific questions. The first question was regarding national debt and what do we do with that? How much is it? How are we going to take a portion, if at all? And the second one was regarding TFSAs, RRSPs, and then I think CMHC home loans or something like that. And instead of saying, oh, this is clearly how it's going to get handled, he painted the context about, look, the thing that you're going to take away from this whole episode is that negotiations have to happen. I thought it was a little bit obvious to make the statement, it's not going to happen overnight, guys. But that goes to both sides, both the people that are not so for Alberta separation and the people for Alberta separation. That statement is to say your say and your voice has to be heard, because nothing will just magically change if we get a yes on the referendum. this is both for reforms and then those who are worried about it. Nothing actually changes drastically until you put your foot forward and enact, because both the negotiations have to begin with the federal government as well as the Alberta Constitutional Convention, because Alberta will have to, if a yes vote goes through, it'll have to rewrite its own constitution. And so all the people have to have their say. So there's no, out of all of these speculations that people are doing and all of the fear and concern about what's going to happen, you actually have to get involved. Otherwise, nothing will happen. One referendum is just one tiny step within a whole marathon that we're about to embark on. So everybody hold your horses, let's breathe, and let's start thinking things through. So the first question regarding Alberta's national debt can be estimated at about from anywhere as low as 75 billion to 150 billion. Mm-hmm. Now, that is closer to the per capita estimate of our debt if you were looking at GDP. And that's how some people estimate it. This is why the three parties matters, because when you say, oh, what are we going to do with the national debt? There's three parties that see that entity completely separately. One party says Alberta has no national debt because we've been over contributing 44 to 47 billion annually. In that party's mind, Alberta does not owe Canada a national debt. As we've been over contributing, we can
wash our
hands clean of it. Now, that might not be realistic in negotiations. So another party says, whoa, some companies have come out and say we have like 130 billion in debt. And so that could be closer to the per capita GDP portion if you were going to say that's our portion of the debt. Now, to pay that off, in the document, if everybody recalls when we talked about the CPP and the transition into an APP, Alberta Pension Plan, the LifeWorks report had stated that we are owed Alberta $360 billion to go towards our CPP based off of our contributions. Mm-hmm. Now, some people are saying if our negotiations with the federal government, they claim, no, we need a portion of money to help with the national debt, then Dennis, him and the rest of the Alberta Prosperity Project and some other Albertans suggested as a negotiation and a good faith chip, we keep the half that they used because they wanted to keep conservative estimates in the document. So they only used half of the LifeWorks report for the CPP. That's 160 billion.
But of the total that they think we're owed, we'll give the other half to...
We give the other half to Canada as a good faith. If this can go towards whatever it is that you think we owe for the national debt, here's the other half of what we are owed via the CPP.
Mm-hmm. And in the book, when they gave the conservative estimate, they were drawing off of that all of the potential benefits that could come from just half the number, probably because of what Maddie's addressing is if we had to, let's say, give a good faith, here you go, so that way we can just wash our hands of this if Canada's, getting antsy with us, then, oh, right, we will give you half of what we actually think is the full owed CPP payout. But
precisely. So that was the three different parties that he kind of painted for regarding the national debt, because just like there was a bit of a debate as to what we're owed for the CPP, there's a debate about what does Alberta owe for the national debt. So that'll come up within negotiations with the federal government. The second question was regarding TFSAs, which are tax-free savings accounts, and RRSP, another version, but that one does have tax penalties when you withdraw. And then that home loan program, all of those are federal programs. And so the question was, what's going to happen with that money? Do we take them over? And his response, he said, obviously, like most other of the federal programs that we addressed within the document, Alberta will probably find a way to put it under Alberta's jurisdictions. We'll transition that. He said, however, one thing you have to consider is that right now in Canada, because of the minimum 10 different taxes we have put upon us in Canada, a tax-free savings account has some benefit. But in an independent Alberta with 10% corporate tax and no personal income tax. The benefit to having a tax-free savings account, there won't be much benefit when the taxes are so low. You're not worried about escaping all of the tax burdens that goes on with your savings.
Yeah, you're not fearful for the need of a tax shelter program.
Yes, a tax shelter program, exactly.
It's a tool that you might not need in the toolbox. A tax-free savings account could be an irrelevancy for independent Alberta.
Yes, and so those were the things he said to consider for regarding those two questions in those federal
What is
programs.
a tax-free savings account? Oh, saving but it doesn't get taxed?
Yeah, the government can't get their hands on it. There's a percentage that...
Yes, and you can go to any bank. You can even go to, I think, Silver Gold Bull. They also do TFSAs that you can attach it to silver.
And that
Yellow pocket.
that also can play into the document as well when they were talking about the sort of like fund and royalties paid out to Albertans. So for all you know, like the savings that you are having and holding currently, you will be getting them by our production, like by holding, basically being like a sort of shareholder of Alberta's resources. So I think that you'll be getting money either way.
Yeah, exactly.
You are a richer individual in an independent Alberta than if we're not.
That's true, because even in regards to the CMHC loans or whatever for the homes, that the other half of that, because people are generally concerned what's going to happen to their assets, going from Canada to Alberta.
Right.
Your asset value inherently goes up in an independent Alberta because they're not. It's like when you pull out of, because of all the taxes, your home suddenly doesn't have all of those property taxes on them, and then same with your car if it's not paid off, and there will be a change. So, but your assets will also be more valuable in an independent Alberta when there's not all those strings attached to it.
So will your voice. So will your vote.
My question was in relation to the inflationary aspect, because most of the time our values of our homes are supposedly going up, right? But we know that that's just the dollar going down. So we already know that once we transition to an independent Alberta, some things are going to have to stay in place for a while as we're getting ourselves transitions. And like one of the things will be currency and such. So I'm kind of like, sure, our assets might potentially go up in value over time, right? But until then, people's like property values right now, I'm assuming they're going to stay the same until our currency changes. Am I correct? Because we're still in inflationary times despite the taxes that Canada has been putting on us.
Okay, so the document makes reference to the potential possibility of having used the USD as a currency until we find ourselves in position to get an Alberta-based dollar. Because there's a huge financial change going on in the world, like right now. So that fear is going to be a reality that has to be negotiated and faced by all of us, regardless of whether we were in independent Alberta or not.
That's true.
Because the debasement of the currency by the quantity of printing that it even all the way from the 2008 housing crisis scam, and as well as what we're facing with what happened with the COVID scam. And because there was a lot of printing, just a lot of printing and saving banks that shouldn't be saved. And so we're going to be the consequences for that are going to have its effect regardless. I know that doesn't put anyone's mind at ease, but we are going into transitioning to an independent Alberta. There will be some uncertainties because even the property value is going up on paper and on books because of the printing. That's not the actual real value. Mortgages have been rehypothecated and put into these packages over and over again. The banks didn't change their strategies, even from when you look at the movie The Big Short, where they tried to kind of explain what it was about the fraud that they did by taking all sorts of different loans that didn't have really security-backed loans and then putting them in a package for people to invest in. As an independent Alberta, we're going to have to come up with tools and structures to mitigate those problems, those risks, because that's fraud. And so there's so much fraud in the system, we're going to have to find our way through it. And the markets are going to have to adjust for the truth, because right now, even the markets are the big seven. It makes up the market in the West, so it's how can seven companies seven companies have a higher value than the actual working GDP of Germany?
Right.
Come on. Like, I mean, tell me that there isn't a lie somewhere in this. So we're going to have to find our way through this, so that it's not really a question that's totally answered, is because there's a truth to be found, and we are going to need smart enough members of our new legislature and our judiciary system, and we're going to need to create like infrastructure banks within province or within country. We may have to have an international bank that we might need to create when we do our negotiations for things outside of our country, with Canada, with the United States, like joint projects, joint efforts. So we're going to need, as described, we did talk about this. We're going to need bulkheads for the Titanic, so to speak, right? That actually go all the way up to the surface. So that way, if certain sections of our economy do get some holes punched into them, the whole ship isn't going down. So that's the best metaphor that I believe I can offer to help answer this question.
And then I was having a conversation with someone in person, and they were like, well, why can't we just do what Quebec does, right, to gain more sovereignty? Because most people know that Quebec has control over their own immigration policy. They have control over their own pension policy and such and such and such. And so if you go to the Alberta Prosperity Project's website, they actually do answer that question, but I can give you like a tiny little synopsis on that. So they do it because like Alberta doesn't have much of a say in the Senate as Quebec does. Quebec has 78 seats. Alberta has 37, and Quebec's also a bit
half.
Yeah, literally. So when you want to form a majority government, that's why Quebec has such a sway that it does over negotiating and kind of having a bit of its thumb on the federal government, is because it is kind of the make or break of a party being able to get a majority, and then that's basically less infighting for you to be able to implement the policies and the laws and all of that you want to do. So Alberta, it looks at us in that respect as you don't really offer me anything, so why we have no bargaining power essentially when it comes to that. But Quebec has that bargaining power.
No, that's a good point, because some people, when Albertans have made the argument, oh, we're underrepresented, that sounds like a sentiment, a wah-wah sentiment. It is literally,
It's just a fact.
it's underrepresentation in terms of our judiciary systems. We actually don't have anywhere near the amount of MPs representing us in the Senate. So we can't negotiate with the same power or the same emphasis because we just don't have the representation. This is not just a nice sentiment of people complaining, although there is that.
Now, even I have my own questions, and I think Dad and Maddie, you guys can kind of help me when I'm branching off of why people are thinking this, because to me, I'm like, I've heard before that they wouldn't want to get rid of the money basket, but no one said that when someone says the question, why can't we be more like Quebec? They're saying, to me, I can see why they would see it as a null and void point, because they're like, but why couldn't they just, I don't know, basically grease our wheels a little bit to make us stay in Canada? Like, how come they haven't done that? And how come we can't even negotiate for our wheels to be greased? Which, by the way, you wouldn't even be want to doing anyway for someone who abuses you, but irregardless, I think that's what my question would be, is how come we still can't get that Quebec, not less so just even the factual we have no representation, but how come on a Canadian government, federal government prospect, they haven't thought, hey, in order to keep these cows happy and not leave, right, because they're our biggest economic source of wealth, maybe we could grease their tires. Like, how come they haven't been doing that, and how come we can't have a bit more control over our immigration, say, as Quebec does and such?
Well, this question has really been thought through by Ben Trudeau, his work. So I will encourage some people. I'm trying to remember the name of the event that we did where we had Bruce Party.
The Courage to Listen?
Yeah, so the Courage to Listen event. One of the speakers was Ben Trudeau. He's placed what would be considered probably the most reasonable argument that I have heard as to Alberta trying to flex a little bit better within because this kind of also plays a little bit into the Alberta sovereignty within a United Canada play that Danielle Smith's government likes to stand in. But when you look at the history, like after Ben Trudeau talks and makes his presentation, but when you look at the work of like Michael Wagner, if you look at the work of even Corey Morgan, the Sovereignist Handbook, we've done this before. We've played this game several times. I think one of the reasons why we don't get heard in negotiations is, well, first off, we're not serious enough as a province. Stop paying taxes, stop sending the resources. They'll listen to us real quick. It's like playing a game and we're using the rules of our abuser. It doesn't work that way. We need to reinvent the game, hence why the independent Alberta as a nation. We've got to change the game. We got to stop playing under Canadian Confederation, because if you were to look at the deal that is the Canadian Federation under the position of, well, would we like to enter Confederation now as we see it and know it? The answer would be a resounding no. And that's what people don't understand. We're still holding on to a romanticism of Alberta being able to work something out with the abusive husband. And it's like, no, we really just need the divorce. And there's going to be some hits that we're going to take. And that's the negotiation part.
Well,
right?
so for the logistics, like now I feel like I have a bit of the answer to my own question as well. Because when APP first started and we were attending their first meetings, they said they wanted to use this movement as leverage. And then eventually they kind of came to the conclusion, because the Constitution Act in 1982, right? It requires that if you want to make any amendment to the Constitution, right? Alberta is subjugated and beholden to that, just like any of the other provinces. The difference actually between Alberta and Quebec, and by the way, I'll just actually say, for the Constitution Act, you need approval from the House of Commons, from the Senate, and then at least 7 provinces representing 50% of Canada's population, right? So that's actually
never get.
That's been a point of contention that some people have been bringing up. Again, it's resurfacing, and a part of me goes like, I encourage you to go to an APP meeting then if you actually want to know the answer to this question, because most of Canada would have to agree to Alberta leaving, which is, as Dad's saying, that's like not going to happen, right? But because Alberta is adherent to this Constitution Act, right? If we wanted to, have some sort of negotiation in amending the Constitution for maybe more sovereignty from the federal government, right? We have to get all the other provinces to agree to that, right? And then that's a little bit harder, because then what does our relationship with the rest of the provinces look like? And that's actually a huge negotiating factor. For Quebec, though, in their case, what's different is that back when the Constitution Act in 1982 was being formed, what happened was Quebec never politically recognized it, and they rejected it, and they refused it actually. And so then they didn't sign it. So, but what happened is Canada, the federal government, they said, well, you're still legally bound to it. They ignored them, right? But politically, they're not bound to it. So they have a little bit of that leverage point to make it look like, well, if you do anything that has to do with Quebec, right, and changing the Constitution, if you don't acknowledge us, right, this gives us reason to look and go like, guys, we got to separate, right? It brings more provinces, or just Quebec in this case, to say, if you do that, then we might decide to leave, right? Because look, we could issue to the people and say, well, we actually never recognized this and we refused it outright, and now look at what they're trying to do, right? And so that's where the federal government would look at that, where Quebec holds a large portion of the population of Canada, and they might be like, oh, shoot, that might not be good. And that's why they also have more leverage. Alberta doesn't have that.
Truly, we're not doing strongman negotiations, which that requires an informed citizenry on what it is that we are capable of actually doing. At some point in time, given what you had mentioned, there's going to be the Molin Labe statement that Leonidas, supposedly said to the Persians, and it's going to be, okay, well, then come and take it. Because at some point, Alberta will have to make the decision to basically either turn off the tap, stop paying federal tax, like just become unruly. We're trying to go through all the steps that are necessary to also show. We're talking about a romanticism of mind that a lot of people have about what is Canada, and they don't even understand what that is. And they don't understand the foundation of why it was built. They have history lessons that were given to them by, a Prussian education system, of which we were all victims. Like, I stand included in this. And so a part of what even APP was to start educating, to show that there are steps that we can take. There's actual plumbing. And as you go through all of these and you bring as many of our fellow citizens as we can through the process, they're going to see the rules for thee, but not for me dynamic that Canadian Federation is going to exercise against us. And when that starts to come into light, and the citizens that are paying attention to this story, that are involved with getting the petition signed, and then, a referendum, and it's just like Madison had said at the beginning, this isn't just going to change overnight. Like then negotiations, and a lot of people here in Alberta might feel like, well, we're going to go into those negotiations on good faith, like looking for a way to resolve. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like I say, yeah, bring that best intention and good faith dynamic forward. But rest assured, if you have any historical understanding of who the enemy within the Levant, within the Laurentian elites of Ottawa are, you're going to realize that you're going to find yourself with Patrick Henry's point of view in 1775 at the Virginia Congress, when it's no, give me liberty or give me death, because all grievances of redress that they put forward to the king, the crown, the establishment, like the Privy Council's never going to let this happen. They're never going to let us become an independent country. So, but we need our citizens to come along with us for the journey, so that everybody sees the enemy hasn't changed.
That, and I want to say we have different points of grievances, and that's what I think the context is as well. It's like, I think that there's two things that are kind of need to be acknowledged about the Quebec versus Alberta question. And it's like, yes, I did search it up, and Quebec has exercised the notwithstanding clause for, actually they have implemented it in generally all of their laws. When that Constitution Act came in, it's because they were using it as a form of protection. It was like, okay, well, we're just going to use that. And they've used it more than most provinces have combined together, actually. Yep. Quebec has used it more. Alberta has not. Doesn't mean that we could start doing it, perhaps, but I was going to say this is where the consideration of the different grievances comes in, right? Because Quebec, demanding, control over its pension, control over its immigration, all of these things that it is able to leverage and has figured out effectively how to do. It's a different province compared to Alberta, because Alberta, if we are the economic nexus and the central hub for productivity and economic wealth, right, then what we'd be asking for in the sense of, we want control over our immigration. The federal government can look at us and go like, well, Alberta wants control over their immigration so that way they can get more skilled workers into the province, and then they're going to get more wealthier. And the more that they get wealthier, the more that they have bargaining power. And the more that they have bargaining power, the more they have power instead of us. And so it is also looking at it going like there is a certain, they need to keep their foot on Alberta generally, because of the fact that if we did grow, and they even slightly gave a sort of, oh, here you go, you can have some control over this. They know what we'd use it for because we're smart. And then they might see that as threatening. And whereas Quebec, I don't think that they see Quebec as threatening at all when it comes to them demanding more of their control of their immigration or their pension.
We need to stop being District 12 and sending things to Pan Am.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great analogy. I like that, Dad, you alluded to the Courage to Listen town hall, because and again, this whole Alberta independence thing, this is not a party-related thing. Yes, this happened to be a UCP-CA that put it on, but that's because the point of town halls is to get to talk and share education with the people. So the CA wanting to get to know its people and educate with some actual intelligent speakers put together this town hall, but this is not exclusive to UCP. This concerns all of Alberta if Alberta separates.
Yeah, those are some phenomenal speakers.
It's phenomenal speakers, and the one that, Ben Trudeau's on here, and it was very good, but Peter McCaffrey, who's the president of the Alberta Institute, one thing in his speech that really stood out, and people, if you go to the couragetolisten.ca, you can find all of these speeches individually. He said, even if Alberta gets everything Quebec did and has, with the pension, with the immigration control, he's like, if you imagine a scale, yes, Alberta, if it got everything Quebec did, it would be closer to the middle of equality. But it still wouldn't be equality.
That's right.
And it wouldn't be equal with everything Quebec has.
The legislature point, lastly, is on the Alberta Prosperity Project website. They did say Quebec does have a different law system than ours. And so they actually have what's called civil law compared to the rest of Canada, which has what's called common law. And common law works on presidents. So that's like It's actually kind of the messed up part, but also not messed up part about our legal system is we look at past cases and go like, well, based on precedent, right, we can repeat this and we can reference this to say that we're okay to keep doing this, or we're not okay to keep doing this. Precedent, sorry. Yeah. Was I saying like precedence or something? Sorry. But yeah, so that's what ours is. But whereas Quebec they have aspects of common law, but they have civil law specifically when it comes to things like their property rights and their family law, and it's a little bit different than civil law. So even just logistically, if you're also like, well, why not? They also have that to add on top of everything else that we've just mentioned.
Yeah, and like MayCee alluded to, getting our own pension plan and getting our own immigration, addressing those issues, maybe our own RCMP or police force, that doesn't change equalization payments, and that's still a lot of money leaving our country, and we can't stop equalization payments without a constitutional change. And to change the constitution, we would need a higher amount of cabinet members and Senate representatives. That way we could have a fighting chance. But because that's not going to happen, the Constitution's not going to change, and equalization, even though Alberta already did vote over 60, I think it was 63% back in the Kenny days, already voted to change equalization, and nothing happened. That's another reason why listening to those speakers, because they bring up the history of how long Alberta has had these grievances and has been arguing, and they tried to do it in good faith earlier. And the federal government, under people even like Stephen Harper, gave the impression that they would meet us halfway, and then nothing happened. Yep. And so you just have to understand this is a bigger game than what any of us realized. And so we have to, if you haven't, do some digging to understand how long this lovely story has been playing out, because it's not just a sudden, where did this come from? Some people have longer memories than others, and it's up to us to increase our minds so we can make room for all of that information. Do you have another question?
Yeah, we just had one that was like, what about being landlocked? And that one kind of gets addressed as well on the website. So I'll just do tiny little things that were acknowledged. And so one of the things is always, we already are landlocked, period. So if it's like, okay, yes, and the difference is who's managing it. Right now, Ottawa and the federal government are managing us being landlocked. The difference is if Alberta becomes independent, we're the ones managing us being landlocked. And so the only thing that really changes are the deals we make versus the deals Ottawa is making for us. And so it means that we would still have to make trade deals, but now we represent ourselves, right? And so 90% of Alberta's international exports flow to America. So they right now are our largest trading partner. So we'd negotiate with them, right? And vice versa, we'd negotiate with the rest of Canada. And so if it just gives us the sovereignty to have it and make the deals that we're looking for and that we would like with with the rest of the Canadian provinces as well as with the United States. So that's the only thing that really changes in terms of exports and imports. Again, that is still something that we have to manage because we are already landlocked.
So there's 34 sovereign countries in the world that are landlocked. They all have economies.
And think of it this way. All of the things that we mentioned, this is why we encourage you guys to go listen to the series or read the document or both. All the above. The reasons that were all presented in in the document and in those videos makes us better off even for our ability to have bargaining power when it comes to, we already have access to the Trans-Canada Highway and rail lines. Like now we have to renegotiate for all of those. We're in a better position to do it anyway. People that would say no to us would probably be freaking crazy because we can offer a lot more as an independent Alberta than Ottawa is saying we can offer, and we still get access to these things. So if anything, think of it this way. We are in a lesser position now and have access to these routes. Now think of it we're in a better position, and then we are guaranteed access to those routes, because if you like us now with our hands tied behind our back, I'm sure you're going to like us a lot more when we're cut loose. So that's kind of how I would see it as well. And then the last thing I would say is there is the UN Law of the Sea, and this was on the APP's website as well, and it's literally just a thing that says that landlocked nations, they are granted the freedom to access the sea. So if you wanted to also throw it at your friends and say, or just for those who are still a little bit concerned, it's like international law, even though we can get into the nitty-gritties of that, it does say that you can't just like trap a country. It's like basically getting mad at someone who was born. It's like they didn't ask to be born there. We didn't ask to be landlocked. So the rest of the countries and the rest of the world kind of has to acknowledge the fact that, hey, we're human beings and we have rights to the sea just like anybody else.
Yeah, and if Canada wants to play hardball, which they're free to do, and that is obviously a concern, so because this isn't going to be a utopia and it isn't a bed of roses. There's going to be actual problems. We're going to have to negotiate with our neighbors. And we would like to think that Alberta would attempt to be a good neighbor. But if Canada decides that they would like to try to harm our economy in some way, shape, or form, they're going to have to remember that their rail line that goes to British Columbia and the West Coast passes right through us. They're going to have to remember that Highway 1 passes right through our country. So if all of a sudden they decide that they would like to not give us access and not allow our goods to make it into trade for getting, access to a coast and a port, well, fine, we'll negotiate with the U.S. and we can go down through Washington. They've already made statements to that effect anyway. British Columbia is going to have a hell of a time staying and connected with Ottawa. We might be doing them a favor and be like, yeah, so there's going to be transportational tariffs for you to try to pass through our country. Like, don't do this. A good neighbor wouldn't do this, right? We would be like, no, we want to be able to share a cup of sugar and a glass of, a quart of milk with each other. So let's not start off on the wrong foot just because you're butthurt that we're going to be prosperous and we're going to allow innovation and success and prosperity for our citizens to be the primary focus of our nation.
No, that's a good reverse correlation of, what if we don't have access? What if they don't have access to us? We're still a part of the entity within the North American you call Canada, but we are still this piece of land that people need to transport through. So yeah, we could very well say, okay, well, if you want to play that game, you can't get through us.
Yeah, and also too, like when Doug Ford was making his statements back in the day, when it came to trying to say, we'll turn off the taps of the of Alberta to the United States when it was elbows up and all that BS. It's like, yeah, but it goes down into the U.S. and makes its way across the United States and comes up into Ontario. Like, we'll just turn off the taps too to the rest of Canada. You don't get access to our energy. Fine, we just won't trade. Our oil and gas industry won't trade with Canada. Since 85% to 90% is going to the U.S. anyway, and we should actually be building stuff with the product. So we need our own infrastructure so that we can make our own products, right?
Yeah.
And nuclear energy and so forth. Then so be it. You better get drilling there, Quebec. I know you got oil underneath there. You know you got oil underneath there. All the other provinces are just going to have to start growing and flexing and expanding and getting prosperous. And because all of a sudden Alberta just decides that we don't want to play with you no more because you're not being a good neighbor.
People may not be thinking on this way because if you're already a country, you don't think, provinces negotiating with one another. And so this whole Alberta separation movement is an opportunity for all of the provinces to look, where have we been stagnant?
Mm-hmm.
Our potential as an independent nation is going to it transcends everything that is the idea of what Canada is. And like, we've only recently had trade barriers come down between provinces. Like, they were still running. The microbreweries is just an example, just a small example of like some of the problems where you got, microbreweries in Alberta that are not allowed to do business with Saskatchewan, and it's like, you couldn't have two peoples that have more in common with one another, I mean, Saskatchewan may end up looking at Alberta and be like, yeah, we want to do the same thing. And then all of a sudden Alberta and Saskatchewan might be like, well, why aren't we a country?
Yeah.
I mean, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in the very same situation that the United States was when the colonies were turning into states.
Yeah.
And the quantity of power within each of the individual states, like the federal government was really only supposed to be this entity that was for a military, and maybe financial negotiations on the world stage, so to speak. But otherwise, the power was supposed to be within the states anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're just really kind of exercising a American system of economy should we get our own nation. So,
well, actually, I think that my question would probably be if Saskatchewan, right, or Manitoba, if these places started to want to separate themselves and or join Alberta, what do we think that looks like from a like that could look like what you just described, the American sort of model where you have the United States we're starting to come together, but how could that be a sort of I don't know, bad idea in terms of balkanization and such?
So that there's always a threat. I mean, first off, our family's philosophy is a mode of attention, right? It means a lot. And obviously there's going to be challenges that even Alberta as becoming its own entity is going to face. And I think that it would probably be in each of the provinces that do decide something similar, should they decide something similar. Like, think for an example, perhaps, right? Like, these are only examples. We're getting into a lot of speculation and a lot of hypotheticals now. So so now this is just me trying to think of other examples around the world to take a look at where there's some successful models, and then we also can see where we've had like Empire do some fiddling. And so we run that risk. So like, there's no way I could look somebody in the face and say, oh, we got this. Because if you don't have a moral and educated citizenry for your nation, then even a Republican constitution such as the United States, it like look at what's going on with it, right? Like there's all sorts of polarization, which has been by design of certain entities with vested interests in seeing a not so United States. So that could very well be the same thing for interprovincial problems. So balkanization is a risk because smaller entities are a little easier for divide and conquer strategies. So obviously then that means that our citizenry has a responsibility to get educated, get good in the Dark Souls meme. I guess an example of something where there's this larger entity by another entity that has some proxy, like, would be Belarus, in relationship to Russia. You know, you could argue that it's just a proxy of Russia. And in a ways, yes, because they have a lot of cultural integrations that they share with Russia. But they're still their own. You know,
And
like
by
all
proxy,
peoples,
do you
like,
mean like as in Alberta would be acting as sort of like a proxy to the U.S.?
it's possible. I mean, it's the big boy on the block.
It does feel like the most likely thing is that because of the fact that it's right next to us and it's the largest giant. And that's like some of the people are concerned about that, right? Because of course there can be tactics that are used, but especially this is the problem of balkanization actually, is you are in a weaker strategic position compared to other players on the board game, right?
I like our chances as an independent Alberta over what Canada has been. Because the United States can physically take over if they want a strongman Canada. All right,
they could have done it three times over.
Like, and they still could, you know, like 3 Abrams tanks on Highway 1 and they could send in their gliders and we're done.
Well, think of it like this, though, too. Like any negotiating and bargaining power that Canada may or may not have, being a so-called middle power with other bigger powers, where do you think they got most of the resources for their bargaining strength? Alberta. So, okay, you basically just handed it ourselves to ourselves, and now we get to be exactly what we've already been being this whole time, which is the financial leverage. We are that already.
Yeah, the economic engine of Canada is Alberta, a good chunk of Saskatchewan, and the potential is even higher in Saskatchewan, might I add. So, yeah, like in my mind, I would sooner find ourselves because once again, right, Alberta as an independent nation, every individual that is going to participate in whatever that may be, their voice is going to mean more instantly. Like just instantly their voice gets more powerful. Their vote means more. Senates mean more, whoever the elected representatives. We should find ourselves with a judiciary that is elected, not
then the
selected.
laws will mean more.
Right, and
protection will actually be protection.
and well, then also too, like the pride in our country could also be there. You know, like then all of a sudden you have young men and women that want to be involved in our own nation's military, and they want to be involved in a police force that actually is local. It's not representatives from Quebec being told by the RCMP you're going to go and be involved in upholding Canadian law on Alberta citizens, and they don't even have that connection. Like that's one of the reasons why county sheriffs mean so much in the United States, is that they're elected and they're supposed to be, on a first-hand relationship with the county that they are a sheriff to, and that they swear an oath to the Constitution to uphold on behalf of the people, not an entity, not an NGO, not people. It's what was that line from The Patriot or whatever? Is like, why would I want to trade a one tyrant 10,000 miles away for 10 tyrants, 1 mile away, or 1,000 tyrants 1 mile away? It's like, we need the integration of our citizenry to govern within ourselves. No more Ottawa. Like, Ottawa is bad news for Alberta, period. That's why we're getting the movement that we're getting. It's why we're even having this conversation. And we've got to change our negotiating power.
There's two things that I think I want to address, and then I don't know, we'll probably be reaching time. But so the other one would be defense and military. I am plausible that it's just going to be us relying significantly on the United States for that. Because again, Canada doesn't even have a military. So at this point, we are already defenseless. And we are already relying on the US. And so it would, I think, be the exact same story. I don't see us necessarily deciding it's too expensive for us to build our own military without joining NATO, to be completely honest. Unless of course.
Too expensive? I don't know if I agree with that, because our financial potential is going to be there.
If our financial potential and our ability to actually become more of a manufacturing hub producing for itself, like all of a sudden we see that we're the ones that are producing the steel or the necessary metals or the necessary materials to even make weapons of war, which, I mean, like, no, you don't want to, but you can't ignore the fact that it's happening. Then it's like, okay, then maybe we actually very well could get into this sort of game, because nuclear, right? And this is where actually these are some of the concerns that Albertans should be wrapping their heads around. Is if we decided to get into nuclear, right, it means that we have the ability to put our energy into energy extensive tasks and projects, which would include AI, data centers, but also military. And so that's where it is a slippery slope, because of course nuclear is good because it can get more shit done at a cheaper rate, right? But at the same time, what are we building and what for, and who does it go to, and who are we trading with? And that's where Albertans really need to focus and hone in on, like, who are we giving so we can make shit. That's nice. Do we give it to just anybody? I would argue no.
So something to consider in this line of thinking is how the Second Amendment of the United States was written, because it had to do with an active citizen militia. So that means that all citizens had to bear arms, but they were also a militia. So we could come up with similar structures where, just even through an education system, that get revamped. Like, everybody understands how to use guns. Everybody understands how to defend their territory and their regions, so it's like, you have an active citizenry that understand that there is a moral responsibility to being a member of the Alberta militia, which is its citizens. So then that way you're not just dealing with an entity that is the Alberta military. It's like, no. All your citizens are capable of being a soldier, but that's not their full-time gig, because their full-time gig is also a responsible, active citizen within, engineering or infrastructure or like technologies, STEM, arts and culture. But a part of that is also, there's some countries they have mandatory military service. They have like 2 years, 3 years for some. That once again, this would have to be, because we have an entirely different culture on average, but I mean, it might not be an idea that gets like, kicked to the curb within the culture of Alberta. There's, once again, the mode of attention of the citizen that decides to partake in that. You can have a national pride, but there's also a national grace, to also be an antiquate, like an antidote to over military, because you're right, the threat of a military industrial complex, that's a danger. I mean, just look at the United States, right? All of a sudden, war is business. Like Smedley Butler's book, right? War is a Racket. Fantastic book. And we would want to guard against that as a culture. But you also don't want to be a pushover, right? And so we might look to the United States to come up with some sort of deal where we're like, all right, we want to be able to kind of work hand in glove with you on this matter. But make no mistake, we are going to slowly but surely propagate our own culture and our own means and ethos of how we would like to militarily defend ourselves, and primarily for the purpose of defense, not expansionism. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. What this, once again, negotiation.
I know these are a lot of things that just it does require thinking it through, because again, mode of attention, even if you had your own militia of some sorts, right, there's lots of ways that could get manipulated as well.
Could get weaponized. Yep,
because
absolutely.
Now you have a bunch of individual citizens that know how to do a thing, and then who's to say that we don't turn it in on ourselves? And that's where, of course, that's where what's the common cause then as to why we know this? Otherwise, yes, it can get fragmented, and now all of a sudden you have all of these highly skilled individuals, but they have no idea where to direct the skill at all, and they're like,
it's not in our nature.
It could get weaponized for sure, but
yeah, it's not in our nature to scrap. Like, I think that's an oligarchical farcity that's been pumped into us, is that the natural state of man is conflict.
No, I meant those oligarchical forces could try and do that to us if we don't have that educated citizenry understanding why they did what they did in the first place.
You're already offering the antidote to your question. And that's a part of why we're even having this conversation. Like, why did we start a channel? Like, why are we even putting this out there? It's to actually try to offer the antidote to those problems. And if we don't have an active, educated, a culturally savvy citizenry, well, then, like, I think we're already downstream of the consequences of what it looks like to not have that.
Okay,
I think that's good for this fireside chat for this topic, and we answered questions specifically that came into us so that we could be responsible to the viewers. But we also want to point people to the tools. A lot of this stuff is discussed within the document that we read verbatim and shared with everybody. That's why we did the series. This is going to be the wrap up for us on this series, because now we want to move forward into some other topics so that we can help inform our fellow future Alberta Independent citizens. But at the same point in time, we are still in Canada, so we still want to have knowledgeable citizens. And because the future is sitting in chairs in this podcast that are downstream of my life, and I vowed that I was going to help see through whatever that's going to look like, and whether that's an independent Alberta within a united Canada or an independent Alberta that has nothing to do with a Canada, that's going to be up to the people to decide. But the thing that we know is constant: brains are in use.
Yeah, and I think that lastly, like, my adding contribution to that is I was like doing my AI back and forth, and one of the things that was brought up is the idea of a brain trust, and this is something that commonly comes up is, okay, well, what do we do when we actually want, because we're talking about brains, right? And so what do we want when we're looking for people, experts, but actually maybe genuine experts, right? People that actually are experienced, right? What do we do when we're looking for those types of people to come up with some of these ideas and negotiate on our behalf and And the only way that works is like Danielle Smith, for example, can appoint who her ministers are, but they are downstream of being MLAs, and those are downstream of your vote and your participation in our society. And so if you don't know who those people are, if you don't nominate yourself, if you don't have that conversation, sit down with your buddy Jimmy who knows so much, and you say, Jimmy, I think you'd be great for an MLA, and maybe one day you could be a minister because you know so much about this stuff. And Jimmy's like, no, I don't think I could do it. It's like, no, talk, figure out who the people are, because the only way, like, it's networking essentially. Most people are always talking about like how to create their own successful business. You need good networking, right? Because there's brains, there's knowledge, there's people that are interested, and you're finding your nexus. But that's kind of how it is on this larger scales. We have to be the ones responsible for finding the nexus of the people that we want. That's where the democracy concept actually does work, and it makes sense when you have an educated populace, is because of the fact that they can say, I know exactly who I'm going to vote for because I know exactly who put themselves forward. I was the one who freaking recommended they do it, right? And then now the brain trust is way more than just comprised of people in that board, in that group, surrounded by bad actors, but actual citizens that are paying attention to everything that we have been talking about thus far leading up to this episode.
Yeah, there's a large party of people that some are skeptical and not in favor necessarily of independence, strictly out of the concern that we're going to repeat our mistakes. And that is a very, very large concern. That's actually why we even started the podcast, because we believe that people have started really considering themselves and putting attention, as we always say, mode of attention, putting attention onto themselves and how they operate within the world. And that just macros onto the bigger scale. Because when you stop looking at the systems that are going around you, if you've never looked at it in the first place, and it's because of all of the distractions we have around us, that is when people with intentions that aren't yours, because everybody has intentions, and if you don't put your intention onto the world, other people will put theirs onto you. And so, as MayCee said, it is up to us as citizens, as people, Canadian, Albertan, doesn't matter. Things will go wrong so long as we continue not to have these questions, so long as we avoid looking at the history, so long as we avoid looking at what is going on in our own heads on a level we don't understand. Because the same way, what's going on in the US that we don't understand, what's going on in the Privy Council in Ottawa that we don't understand. There's so much out there in the world, and we have to look upon it, try and understand it, and then share it and continue those networking and good neighbor acts, which includes being educated. So hopefully this has helped educate you in some manner. If it has, share it about. And
then keep joining us, because like this may be the conclusion for this segment, but we are going to be continuing to talk on various topics that relate to it, because that's kind of the whole point of this spew. This is your cute little introduction. So if you think that you just got started, you really did just get started. So, and then we'll be probably going on to talk about lots of other topics like technocracy we didn't even touch on. So that'll be a fun little presentation and teaser for y'all to keep following and subscribe and all that fun jazz, because follow along. That's what we're trying to figure out, is that the networking rant we just went on and I just went on, network. So that's you want to have good friends.
Yes, we love our good friends
when you can have friends.
Yeah,
precisely. So send in any questions if you have any. We will try and be good friends to you and ask our good friends for answers if we don't have any, because we aren't all knowing, obviously. This is just one little Albertan family trying to figure out the world.
Fireside chat.
Yeah, we're thinking out loud.
Thinking out loud. So thank you for joining us on this episode of
Fireside chat, thinking out loud.
Yep, thinking out loud. Thank you, everybody. And adieu. Adieu, adieu.
Bye.
Bye.
Dad's wave.